So we're going to start with COVID. And Kim Janey, you get the first question through a random draw. As acting mayor, you have required city employees to be vaccinated or submit to regular testing, but have resisted calling for vaccine passports or vaccine proof for the general population. But you did put an indoor mask mandate in place for the city of Boston just a couple weeks ago. Why did you decide to prioritize masks over vaccines? Are vaccines not a more effective tool for control of the virus?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for putting on this debate. Vaccines are the most effective tool to protect ourselves from COVID-19. It is why I have led with vaccine access, education, and equity. We invested $3 million in a vaccine equity grant. We have stood up vaccine mobile clinics all over our city, and right now in the city of Boston, more than 70% of Boston residents have at least one shot in their arm. We also put in place a mask mandate to help slow the spread. We've done the vaccine verification for our city employees. We were the first in the Commonwealth to call for a mask mandate in our schools. We are taking every step necessary to protect the people of Boston, and should the data and science suggest that there is more that we should do in terms of vaccine passports, I've indicated that I am open.
What would that be?
Well, right now we're following the data and the science, and the data and the science clearly say that we have stabilized COVID infections over the last 4 weeks. We will continue to watch that, as well as the hospitalization rates in our city, to make sure that we are doing everything to slow the spread of COVID.
Michelle Wu, you've criticized Acting Mayor Janey for resisting requiring vaccines for many indoor activities. She responded to that criticism last month saying, quote, "If vaccine passports were imposed today with a government mandate to ban unvaccinated residents from venues like restaurants or gyms, that would shut out nearly 40% of East Boston and 60% of Mattapan. Instead of shutting people out, shutting out our neighbors who are disproportionately poor people of color, we are knocking on their doors to build trust and expand access to the life-saving vaccines," unquote. We know that vaccine requirements could disproportionately affect people of color. Why do you still believe it's the right policy?
I want to echo the thanks to the organizers and hosts today. I'm grateful to be here on this stage with this historic field of candidates. There is no more urgent issue than our recovery from this pandemic, and there is no more proven public health tool than ensuring that we are protecting people in indoor risky activities like indoor dining, going to gyms, or going to large shows. We need both and, not either or. And in this case, I have stood not only with the epidemiologists and the scientists and the public health experts, but with workers and small business owners in our community who have weathered this storm for a year and a half, bearing the burden when there's not clear leadership and directives from government. Now's the time for all levels of government to lead, and at the city level, we should be putting in place protections so that as we are headed into colder weather with more people seeking indoor activities, that we are not putting our workers, our public at risk. That can happen at the same time, and it needs to happen at the same time as continued efforts to close that vaccination gap.
Andrea Campbell, you've talked about the fact that Mattapan, where you live, has the lowest vaccination rate of any neighborhood in the city. And as you've said, you live there, and you are a city councilor who represents Mattapan as part of your district. Why does your district lag so far behind the rest of the city?
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, for organizing, of course, this debate, and thank you to those who are listening and taking time out of their busy schedules to join us this evening. Yes, I have been at the forefront. Frankly, I was the first candidate in this race to not only push for the mask mandate, but also for the city of Boston to absolutely do what New York City, San Francisco, and other municipalities across the country are doing, which is incentivizing folks to get vaccinated, requiring proof of vaccination. We walked into this building and had to show proof of vaccination. And I said, "Oh, why are you requiring that?" They said, "Oh, to keep us safe." And so everyone, of course, needs a standard. We need guidelines, and only the city of Boston can implement those guidelines. So right now we have businesses and different stores and different companies doing different things. That's unacceptable. We're all in this together. We want to be proactive, of course, in making sure we're protecting our residents and continuing to increase vaccination rates. Mattapan is still low. I think it's still 51% as of this morning. So clearly we have work to do to incentivize folks. And we know that if you incentivize folks, New York City, the week they did vaccine passports and cash incentives and masking, they did a range of things. They saw a 40% uptick in vaccinations. We haven't done that in the city of Boston. I'm confident that if we did it here, we would see that uptick in Mattapan and other communities in terms of vaccination rates, which is critically important. It's masking up, it's staying vaccinated, and proactively continuing, of course, to be the leader in protecting our people, which is not currently going to happen if we don't take these measures.
Thank you.
This question is for Anissa Essabi George. You said in last night's debate that folks should expect students to be wearing masks in school all year. But once students have the opportunity to get vaccinated, will you still argue for a mask mandate, regardless of what the case numbers look like? You said we should follow the science. Isn't there science to suggest that when most people are vaccinated, those who are vaccinated can be unmasked?
Vaccination is so critically important across our city, and we need to make sure that we are continuing to share information and educating our city's residents. We've seen today, after still many, many months of the vaccine being available, how long it takes for that education and that access and that information to happen. It will take the school year to roll out a vaccine process. So I think it's really important, especially as we talk about our families, we talk about our kids, we talk about our communities, we talk about the continued need for education and access around the vaccine, that we be very realistic with our city's families and our residents. This will take a full school year to roll out vaccination across the board.
All right, John Barros, you said in last night's debate that you would, quote, require all students who could be vaccinated, end quote. Are you saying that you would make getting vaccinated a requirement for students to attend the Boston Public Schools? And if so, what would you say to parents who, for whatever reason, might not want to have their child get the vaccine?
You know, first let me just say, Tiziana, thank you for facilitating you and Adrian, and thank you to WBUR for hosting and all of the organizing partners. It is great to be on. It's good to be talking to the listeners tonight. It is important that we keep everyone safe, and vaccination is the first thing that we should mandate in public places like schools, where we have people that can carry the virus. It is important, though, that we also understand that there might be medical exceptions. Where there are medical exceptions, we should make sure that there are consistent testing available. If a child, for whatever medical reason, could not get vaccinated, then they should be tested. If a teacher, a staff member could not get vaccinated, but that's the exception. We should make sure people are vaccinated. And then I do agree, because of the breakthrough, that we should make sure people are masked, particularly in spaces where people are spending a lot of time with each other, and schools count for that.
So I'm a parent who's expressing concern, pretend. I don't want this for my child. How do you answer that?
Well, I have to let you know, I have to give you the information that it is important that your child is safe. It is important that other children are safe, and teachers and staff. And so the only way we can ensure that is by people being vaccinated, masked, for people being socially distanced when they can, for us to be able to wash our hands whenever we can. But, you know, one of the issues we have is many of our schools don't have warm water. That's a problem. We need to, in fact, improve our facilities to make sure we have warm water, HVAC systems that work, so we can have air filtration and keep everybody safe.
Thank you.
This question is to Andrea Campbell. A growing number of Boston establishments have already instituted their own vaccine requirements for customers, including Jacques Cabaret, the Quiet Few in East Boston, and the Royale, to name three. Even more companies are requiring their employees to be vaccinated. Why shouldn't it be up to individual businesses to decide what's right for them?
Because we're in a public health crisis. And I think we made it clear when this COVID began that this is not about an individual's health. You get sick and you go out into community, you can not only harm others, you can kill them. And I think we need to be crystal clear as to the fact that this is a public health crisis and that it is about saving lives, and there's a collective responsibility that we all have to play in that. And so early on, of course, and I have to give credit where credit's due, and I give credit to our previous mayor, there were consistent and daily calls actually with the city council on ways in which we could work together to ensure that everyone was getting tested. Of course, making sure there were resources in communities that were hardest to reach, including our immigrant communities and communities of color, resources there to make sure folks had information about the vaccine. So that work continues, but it's a reminder that there's this Delta variant, what we're seeing across the country, we still have to remain vigilant. If we do the right things and are proactive in adopting best practices that we're seeing across the country, I'm confident that Boston will continue to lead the way with respect to our response, and we just have to remind folks we're all in this together.
So we could obviously talk about the pandemic for the full hour, but there are other public health issues facing the city of Boston and the next mayor. One of those is the complex public health crisis in the neighborhood around Massachusetts Avenue and Melnia Cass Boulevard, Mass and Cass. So I want to turn there. There's been a growing tension over the need to address the immediate problem of homelessness, drug use, addiction in the neighborhood, with the long-term goal of decentralizing services. WBUR's Deb Becker reported late last month about hundreds of people now living on the streets in the neighborhood, and yet community members in that area recently defeated a plan that would have used 2 floors of the nearby closed Best Western Roundtable Hotel as transitional housing over concerns that it would just draw more people to the area. As the next mayor, how would you make sure those who are suffering from substance abuse disorder have access to the assistance they need while also addressing residents' concerns about services that are already too concentrated in their neighborhood? And I'm going to start with Michelle Wu.
I've walked through the area near Mass Ave and Melnia Cass Boulevard several times this summer and many times in the years since the bridge was shut down, and we've seen a confluence, the overlapping crises of mental health, substance use, and homelessness. And what you see, what you feel when you are on the ground with the patients that are seeking treatment, with residents, with stakeholders, business owners, is a feeling that government has given up here. That is unacceptable, and I'm running to ensure that we tackle the big, bold challenges in Boston, including taking responsibility for what can happen at the city level. Here, we need a response that expands treatment across the city, working with our community health centers and our partners in this mecca of healthcare to ensure access to treatment all across the city. We need to ensure that we're getting at the root causes of the public health crisis as well as the housing crisis here. This is fundamentally an issue where our lack of housing that is supportive, that is available, has exacerbated a cyclical experience with the opiate crisis for so many.
4 of you have served as or are serving as city councilors. So to hear you say it looks like government has given up, you didn't give up, did you? So why are we at a place where you're saying it looks like government gave up?
We are pouring resources into that area, cleaning the streets, not just once a week, as in most neighborhoods, but now 2 times, sometimes 3 times a day in that area. Our city workers are working so hard to try to pick up the needles that are discarded there at record rates. But the very next morning, we're back at square one. And so we need to be spending our resources and plan to have accountability to fit into a citywide and regional plan to address the opiate crisis, homelessness, and mental health.
Thank you.
Acting Mayor Janey, are we back at square one every day at Mass and Cass? And if so, why isn't what we're doing more effective?
You know, I talk about this issue not from the standpoint of it being an intersection. These are individuals who need help and support. They are ill, they are sick, dealing with addiction and mental health challenges often combined. And I often reflect on my uncle who died of an overdose in the 1980s. And when he died with a needle in his arm, this was viewed a crime. This is now viewed a public health issue, and it is a public health crisis here in the city of Boston. When I spoke with the governor just this morning, we both agreed that we needed a regional approach, that too much of the burden is falling on Boston, that we need to make sure that we have programs here in the city.
Thank you.
And that we also have programs all throughout the Commonwealth.
So, Andrea Campbell, part of your plan to address the challenges at Mass and Cass involves reactivating the services that used to be provided on Long Island by using ferries, which would leave from nearby. We are mindful that part of what everyone's talking about is concern with centralization, right? Gathering. So if you're running ferries from nearby, does that present an issue of attracting more people to receive services? How do you balance that out?
I want to take a step back because you said something, and I appreciate your follow-up question. I'm a district councilor. I cover largely Dorchester, Mattapan, JP, and Rosendale. This section of the city was not in my district. We had, of course, concerns around the opioid crisis, and we mobilized to do things in our parks to offer services, recovery, you name it, so we would not see the crisis to get worse in my district. Everyone up here, they covered that district. That was their jurisdiction. They had no action. They took no action. They had no plan. The very first thing I did when I became a candidate for mayor was to go out and to meet with community, to walk through the area, and to really understand the magnitude of the crisis. I was shocked. I grew up on Mass Ave. I didn't recognize how bad it was until I walked through that area and listened to residents and saw feces and all that on the ground. What did I do? Immediately mobilized all of these stakeholders, developed a plan. I was the first candidate in this race to come up with a plan, and now I'm pushing for implementation of it. This plan came out in January. And the thing is, as a counselor, I can't implement it. It has to come from the mayor's office. It has to come from the acting mayor. And on the ferry service piece.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have to stop you there.
I was the only candidate that pushed for that too.
Go ahead.
If I could add, just to respond to
30
the
seconds.
comment that Councillor Campbell made around no one taking action on this table. In 2016, Councillor Wu was council president, and I started a new committee on homelessness, mental health, and recovery, and we were doing the work. Through that committee assignment, in which I chaired, we had a working group that brought together city officials, state officials, government agencies, and nonprofits doing a tremendous amount of work in the intersection of Mass and Cass and beyond. When then Council President Janey took leadership of the body, she dismantled that committee. It is not a coincidence that we have gone to a place of chaos. People are suffering. A community is struggling. We've got so much work left undone.
Yes.
Please do.
Thank you so much. When I became council president, what I did is I took all of the different health committees that were spread out throughout committees, put them in one. I created a public health committee. And I think there's a lack of understanding of the complexity of the issue to suggest that a city council committee correlates with what is happening on the streets. We know that COVID has made things worse. We also know that this issue has been growing since 2014.
We just heard from Anissa Saibi-George and Kim Janey for our listeners, and I will remind all panelists, you're hearing me interrupt. It's because when that red light hits, we are going to let you know so that we can make sure we keep some fair time and keep the conversation going. Adrienne, can I turn next question to you?
Of course. Staying on Mass and Cass, Michelle Wu, your plan involves, among other things, investing more money in treatment, housing, public transit, hiring more service providers, revamping and centralizing the functions of a number of different city departments. Where will you find the money for all of these investments? And realistically, what do you feel you can accomplish in one 4-year term?
We need to tell the truth about the efforts that have been happening there so far and what is feasible and realistic to accomplish in an urgent way. For 6 years now, we've been talking about the idea of rebuilding a bridge as a potential solution, a bridge that would be in the open ocean, that would require the sign-off of our neighboring municipalities held up in litigation, and a bridge that at last estimate was $100 million and likely will be more than $250 million should it be completed 5-10 years from now. That is the scale of funding that we are prepared to set aside through our capital budget. I've already said, as mayor, in my first 100 days, I will review every single city-owned building and parcel to identify where we can directly build that supportive housing that is so needed. We also have partners in this work. The area and this crisis affects every sector of our city. I'm proud to have been endorsed by Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins, who has had many conversations about how to plug in, how to ensure that across all levels of government we are working together.
So, John Barros, you've said you'd declare a public health emergency to get more resources deployed in the area and expanding hours at the engagement center. Same question I asked a bit ago. If part of the concern is centralization and the need to decentralize, would that not have the opposite effect?
No, we need a plan that is layered in 3 different phases. First is the immediate need to be on the streets right now, which I've been doing almost weekly. I live in that neighborhood. I pass by that area every day, and every day I have to answer to my children in my car, Dad, what are you going to do about this? How are we going to solve this problem? We need boots on the ground right here, right now. And as mayor, I would put together a multidisciplinary team to be on the ground for 24 hours to provide personalized service. If you meet John on the streets and you're bringing him to services, you need to know if those services worked or didn't work when you find John back on the streets tomorrow. You need to understand what else he needs. If maybe he needs a dual diagnosis bed, maybe it's mental health and detox. We are failing. The political officials at this table right now are failing the people on the streets today. And we have one policy that we bring up one day and then we change it for the next. You know, Michelle Wu was talking about a ferry that she wouldn't build a bridge. Now today she's going to figure out how to build a bridge with capital improvements. Mayor Janey can't articulate a plan.
Thank you.
And just to clarify,
30 seconds. Michelle Wu.
What I'm saying is that we should not be promising or talking about a bridge because it is not a realistic solution. I'm running to deliver change in the 4-year mayoral term that we are seeking, and that is something that would be way off in the future. We should be using the funding that we are setting aside for that project way off in the future and direct it instead to more urgent, more actionable items like constructing supportive housing where we need it most.
Thank you. And you are listening. I got to take a reset here, and we need to move on. I'm sorry. You are listening to a special edition of Radio Boston live from WBUR City Space. This is a debate between the 5 major Boston mayoral candidates: John Barros, John Barros, Andrea Campbell, Anissa Essaibi-George, Kim Janey, and Michelle Wu. Today's debate is sponsored by WBUR and our partners at WCVB Channel 5, UMass Boston's McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies, and the Boston Globe. We are broadcasting live on 90.9 WBUR and streaming live video on YouTube. You can find a link to that feed on the WBUR homepage, wbur.org.
Let's move on to another issue that's crucial to the future of the city of Boston: housing and development. Last week, in response to a ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court striking down a national eviction moratorium, Acting Mayor Janey instituted a ban on evictions in the city of Boston. Do any of you disagree with that policy? Councilor Essaibi-George.
I absolutely do. And I think that it is, and as I mentioned in a report that was shared, that it's putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. We have families across our city who are struggling, and we have the resources at the city level, as well as in partnership with the state level, to access the resources our families need today. We have an incredible Office of Housing Stability that the City Council had worked in partnership with former Mayor Walsh to make sure they had the resources, especially at the start of COVID. We need to work every day to make sure families across this city can access those resources.
But aren't you concerned that there'll be a flood of evictions?
Of course I'm concerned about it, and that's why we need to make sure that our families have the tools and the resources at their disposal today. The eviction process is a very long process, no doubt. We've got work to do to support families today, and those resources are in place in our Office of Housing Stability.
So, Acting Mayor Janey, you've said the moratorium will be in place as long as it needs to be. Do you have any idea how long that needs to be is, and what comes next? I mean, we can't ban evictions forever, correct?
No, we can't, but we need to do something in the immediate. When the federal level eviction moratorium was struck down by the courts, it was important to act on the local level. And beyond the eviction moratorium, we have invested in the rental relief with $50 million. It's keeping people in their homes, 3,400 households, 70% which are of color. We are doing the work. We are making sure that those who own their homes, we invested $5 million in a foreclosure prevention fund. We're making sure those who are looking to buy their first home have the opportunity to live out their dream. We've quadrupled the down payment assistance, taking it from $10,000 to $40,000. It is disappointing to hear anyone on this stage disagree with the eviction moratorium, particularly someone who benefits from a company that reported by the Globe, routinely evicts tenants throughout the city.
I recognize Anissa Essaibi-George, you may want to respond there, but I want to come back to you first. Landlords come in all kinds of varieties. What do you say to those who rely on the income in order to pay their own mortgages and are concerned
This is why we have the Rental Relief Fund, $50 million. It helps tenants as well as landlords stay in their homes, figure out an agreement. Every single day, my team, my administration, the Office of Housing Stability works with tenants, works with landlords, goes to the courts directly for anyone who might find themselves there to help to resolve these issues. That is what we need. We need to make sure that we're helping both tenants and landlords.
Thank you.
Anissa Essaibi-George, Acting Mayor Janey has just said you have a personal stake, or your family does, in the eviction moratorium. Would you care to respond to that?
I think it's interesting that Acting Mayor Janey thinks it's appropriate to bring up my family. I am concerned about the families in this city. That is who I'm looking to serve. That's who I'm looking to work for. That's who I'm looking to represent.
I did not mention family.
Okay.
Can I chime in here?
Yes.
Certainly.
So first,
Andrea
I was
Campbell.
the first candidate to call for the eviction moratorium. So I want to make that clear because, and in the face of that opposition that you often hear, I did it because, one, evictions disproportionately affect residents and communities of color during COVID. And second, we're in a public health crisis. You have to remind landlords of that. That means if people are homeless, if they're on the streets, it can contribute, of course, to higher infection rates. But of course, it needs to be coupled with the Renter Relief Fund. And we have to remind landlords that those resources are available to them. If anything, we need to streamline the process in the city of Boston, staff up that office so those resources get out to community and landlords a lot faster than they currently are.
So a question to any of you. John Barrows.
I just want to jump in on
Yes,
this because I think, so let's look at the numbers. We're not getting the relief out enough. Most people, when they hear moratorium, they think they don't have to pay rent. We're misleading them. People still have to pay rent. I just want to say very clear on the radio, this is a public service announcement. Because there's a moratorium, your rent still adds up. And the longer your rent adds up, the more you will owe. It's a disservice only to do a moratorium, which is why we need to actually be out there and make sure that we're working with everyone to cure your rent now. There's enough money in the city of Boston to cure everybody's rent. Do not sit there and keep adding on your rent. A moratorium alone is not going to make it.
So I want to talk about gentrification for a minute. And this is an open question to any of you. Have any of you seen a city in the United States that has successfully addressed the challenges of gentrification? And if you have, what did that look like?
Yes. It looked like the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative in Roxbury, where we built and transformed the neighborhood and yet didn't displace the residents. Why? Because while we were building, A, the residents were in lead of the planning process. B, we built on a community land trust. We amassed the largest community land trust in the country, right here in Boston, the largest urban land trust protecting affordable housing, protecting parks, playgrounds, protecting the 10,000 square feet greenhouse that we built there, protecting the jobs that we created. That neighborhood is always going to have a stock of permanently affordable homes as we continue to attract private development, as we continue to attract market rate homes. It is the perfect scenario of how you create mixed income neighborhood through bringing in resources and allowing people to continue to own and stay.
Is there anyone else who'd like to present a model?
I would just add on to that.
We'll go Andrea Campbell and then Michelle Wu.
And give credit where credit's due. And Barrows is right. If anything, we need to invest more money in community land trust. That's why I was really proud to start the vacant lot initiative, looking at city-owned lots. Literally, there are hundreds of them, most of them in communities of color, where we could be activating them not only for community land trusts, but homeownership opportunities to prevent displacement. We could offer deed restrictions. There are a whole host of tools that government has to keep people in their home. I grew up in the South End in Roxbury. I currently live in Mattapan. And I can't afford to live in my old neighborhood. So if we're not proactive as a government, we're going to continue to see displacement and, of course, rising rents. But we have all the tools at the city level to do that. Community land trust is one of them, but I'm the only candidate, and I talk about this all the time. I'm not just talking about city-owned land. I'm currently activating them right now. We have 30 parcels out on Blue Hill Ave right now. Most of those would be housing opportunities coupled with commercial development and economic opportunities for those same communities. It has to be housing coupled with jobs and wealth building at the same time.
Thank you. Councilor Michelle Wu.
I'll second that there are examples right here in Boston within our history that we should look to as a model. We would not have affordable housing in the South End at Via Victoria, at Tent City, or Tai Tung Towers in Chinatown, if not for the leadership, the activism, the fight that those who came before us ensured that they pushed back on. Those who were told time and again it would be too hard, too expensive, too impossible to do, but we leaned in and ensured that there was emergency protections followed by stable housing. I'm proud that my housing plan not only pushes to use every tool in the toolbox that city government has with funding, streamlining our zoning process, leaning into city-owned land to add housing on top, but also calls for rent stabilization, the emergency protections that we need to ensure that our residents are not pushed out of the city, and we are responding with urgency to meet this moment.
I'd like to jump in.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And I want to start by applauding Mr. Barrows, his work in the Dudley Street area. I lived in that neighborhood, as did he, before it was transformed by the power of residents. And I also saw gentrification firsthand when my family was not able to hold on to their brownstone in the South End, when the South End gentrified in the 1980s. That was a brownstone that my great-grandparents bought in the 1920s for $9,000. $9,000 was all the money in the world in the 1920s to a family that moved up from North Carolina and only had 2 nickels to rub together. Now that same brownstone is worth millions and millions of dollars. Each floor has been condoized. and each condo alone is worth millions of dollars. We need to make sure that we are using all of the tools in the toolbox. This is why we've done not just the rental relief and the eviction moratorium and the home ownership. We've got land trust. Just last week or the week before, we cut the ribbon on a property in Chinatown through a land trust.
Thank you.
Michelle Wu, you say you support rent control. One of your opponents, John Barrows, wrote a piece for Commonwealth magazine over the summer arguing against this. He wrote about rent control in part, less new housing is produced and rents increase for anyone not protected by rent control's narrow rules. The long-term results are higher rents, more displacement, and reduced economic growth. It's not a real solution for the many families in Boston who currently struggle to afford already too high rents. Why do you believe he's wrong?
Look, I've been excited to have this conversation with Barrows on the trail. The question in this moment of urgency, if you spend time in any of our neighborhoods with residents at Georgetown Homes in Hyde Park, in East Boston, at Grant Manor in the South End in Roxbury, we know every single day our residents are at risk of getting pushed out. The census data shows that even as Boston is growing, Black Bostonians are fewer in number today than 10 years ago. The pressures of our housing market are at emergency levels. And so the real question isn't why I'm the only candidate who's willing to fight for every tool in the toolbox. It is why the rest of the candidate field isn't acting with the same sense of urgency. There is a multi-layered housing crisis here. We need to produce more housing. We need to ensure we're using every power within city government. But there's also a displacement crisis happening at the very same time, and I want to make sure that we are moving to address that emergency as well.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in real quickly.
Quickly, please, because I'm conscious of Anissa Saibi-George's share time here, and I want to get to her. So,
yes.
quickly,
So
please.
I'll keep it quick.
Thank you.
So look, Michelle is absolutely right. The housing crisis, the pressure, the displacement, all of that is right. But she still can't articulate why rent control would help solve that. The reason is rent control would not help solve that. It would create a further shortage of housing. We have a shortage crisis in Boston. We are growing in population, and we can't provide housing, which is why housing is too expensive. We've got to provide more affordable housing at rates that people can buy.
Thank you. So Anissa Saibi-George, I'm sorry, I'm going to move on. Anissa Saibi-George, all the candidates have advocated for building more housing. How do we accomplish that while also acknowledging that according to Climate Ready Boston, some 11,000 buildings in Boston will already be threatened by regular stormwater flooding by 2070? According to NOAA, there were 7 days of flooding in 2019, and there could be as many as 95 by 2050. So continue to develop, but also take care of climate resiliency in existing buildings. How to do it.
Sorry to interrupt. I was excited to answer that, but I do want to talk about the gentrification question as well. Climate action, of course, is important. When we think about environmental justice in our city, we need to make sure that our most vulnerable communities are included in that conversation. Certainly, sea level rise and the impacts of water are critical, as is the lack of tree canopy in too many parts of our community, as is the rising rates of asthma for too many of our families across the city. We see the impact of climate change, and we need to do that work. It is why I endorsed Senator Markey. I believe I'm the only person on this podium to endorse Senator Markey in his reelection because of his work at the federal level. Boston needs to act. The region needs to also be responsible, and we need to support federal action in this case. I want to touch on gentrification, though, quickly. We need to create more direct pathways to home ownership. When we talk about stabilizing communities, families, and children, it comes through home ownership. That has to be a priority. We need to also grow our housing market. Boston needs to continue to grow.
So you talked about tree canopy. Not in my script, but I want to ask you follow-up on that, because something like that, it would seem, could be quite straightforward to do, and yet we know it's not. So what does a mayor do on an issue like that?
We plant trees, very simply, and we think about the work that a mayor needs to do. We think about the responsibility of leading this city. We think about near-term, mid-term, and long-term action, whether it's around mass casts, whether it's around tree canopy coverage, whether it's around filling potholes in our street. A mayor's job is to work for the people of the city of Boston.
Thank you.
This question is to Kim Janey. What's the single most important thing the city can do to make housing more equitable, accessible, and affordable that you can accomplish in the next 4 years?
Well, it is a package. There is no one silver bullet for any of this. We've been in a housing crisis long before COVID-19. This is why we have approached it from a number of fronts, from rental relief to investing in home ownership. I agree with Councilor Asabi George on that. We need to do more in terms of home ownership in the city of Boston. We need to do more to make sure that the development that happens in our city is addressing the needs of families in our city, families who want to stay, to put down roots, to build a home, to raise their children or not have children. And so we need to do this by working with development teams who want to do development right without displacement. We need to make sure that we're working with our civic groups and our community leaders on this issue. We need to be working with our state partners on this issue. We know that the cost to build is very high. We know that we have a short supply. We have to continue to build in the city of Boston. We have to make sure that the city grows. And as we do so, we need to make sure that there's a pipeline to jobs.
Thank you. You are listening to a special edition of Radio Boston live from WBUR City Space. This is a debate between the 5 major Boston mayoral candidates, sponsored by WBUR and our partners at WCVB Channel 5, UMass Boston's McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies, and the Boston Globe. We are broadcasting live on 90.9 WBUR and streaming live video on YouTube. You can find a link to that feed on the WBUR homepage, wbur.org. We turn now to a question submitted by UMass Boston student Trevor Jarogi.
Hello, my name is Trevor Jarogi. I am 27 years old. I am a Master's in Public Administration student at the McCormick Graduate School, class of 2022. I am originally from Nairobi, Kenya. I moved to the United States when I was 10 years old. So my question to the Boston mayoral candidates is, what would you do as a candidate to ensure that Boston does not see the rise in violent crimes that we have seen in other cities with large populations of people of color? Thank you.
John Barris, what's your answer?
I missed the question.
Okay, so let me paraphrase. What would you do to keep crime from rising in Boston?
Crime from rising in Boston. So to address crime is to address poverty. It's to address trauma. It's to address the lack of social, educational, and academic and economic opportunities. In fact, as part of the Walsh administration, during the last 7 years, we saw crime go down. We also saw arrests go down. That's not a coincidence. It's because, as Chief of Economic Development, we helped to bring in 140,000 new good jobs to the city of Boston, driving unemployment down to 2.4%, to historic lows in all of our neighborhoods. That's why Boston was safer. It is about opportunity. It is about, in fact, investing the organizations in our communities that are addressing the root causes of crime. It's about providing stable housing, providing opportunities for people to have homes that they don't have to worry about paying the rent on, that they can go to good jobs, come back home, and know that they're stable and financially capable to provide for their families.
Thank you.
Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, and thank you for the student for the question. It has to be a comprehensive response, and I know this because I've been a chair of the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice for the last 6 years on the council. I am the only candidate that has been leading the way on these issues, pushing our department to be more transparent and accountable and to get at the root causes of violence. My first budget initiative was the Youth Development Fund, which is generating millions of dollars for organizations that serve youth and organizations that have a proven track record of interrupting violence and preventing it. My plan right now as a candidate builds upon that leadership. It is the most comprehensive of every candidate in this race. And it says two things. One, it recognizes that police alone cannot solve violence by themselves, cannot eradicate violence by themselves. So it says, transform our response to it, restructure our police department so that the specialized units, all of the various units that often are out of community, come back to the districts so we have officers walking the beat and truly doing community policing. And when we do that, we save millions of dollars. Take those millions and redirect them to the root causes of violence.
Thank you.
Mental health, jobs, trauma, and so much more.
I think what we should do is just keep going down the line on this. So, Anissa Saibi-George.
When we think about safety in this city, when we think about making sure that crime is not just low but non-existent, we've got a great deal of work to do. And it's certainly around policing and public safety, but it's also around education. It's also around housing. It's also around economic opportunity and creating opportunity for our city's residents to engage in their future. It's also about reentry, and that we have a Office of Reentry Services and a commitment to our returning citizens to do the work to support them during that time. It's around food security. It's around trauma services. It's around all of the work that a city needs to do for her people. I have a certain commitment to our community, and I have a commitment to fulfill the promise of community policing in our city. We've got work to do to make sure that our Boston Police Department can work in partnership with members of our community, our city residents, our community-based organizations, and that they can work with our police department as well. It's about being proactive and preventive and having the appropriate response.
Thank you.
Kim Janey?
Thank you so much, and I agree with much of what has been said here. Certainly education is important, economic opportunity is important, making sure that we are addressing trauma in our city. I am proud of the work that I have done over the last 5 months as mayor of Boston. We have brought homicides down by 32%, fatal shootings down by 50%, and gun arrests are up by 26%. That is comparing 2021 to 2020. But when we compare what we've done this year to the 5-year average, the numbers are still down. The work that we are doing is working. We are building relationships in the community, making sure that there is community policing. We are reimagining how we respond to crisis with a mental health pilot. So we have a co-response, an alternative response, and a community response. And we're doing that work in partnership with the residents of Boston to keep everyone safe.
Michelle Wolf?
I want to thank Trevor for the question. As a mom, it is something that is near and dear to me, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure that all of our streets are safe. The people who have been doing this work already, talking about the same issues that we discuss year after year and campaign after campaign in this city, need support and need the resources in community embedded to tackle those root causes. We know that in many parts of our city, the majority of calls that come into our police are for situations that sending armed law enforcement in isn't connecting with the services that are needed, whether it's for issues around mental health, substance use, or homelessness, and that we need a public health connection to every bit of safety in our community. Housing and youth jobs and ensuring that we are providing that stability to community members is fundamental. But most of all, it is following the lead of those already doing the work on the ground through our faith communities, through community organizing, and providing the resources to be deployed where they can have the greatest impact.
I'm going to move us on now to education. It's a topic that is top of mind for a lot of parents, especially tonight. Kim Janey is acting mayor. Today is the first day of the school for Boston Public School students. For many of them, it's their first day back in a school building in a year and a half. Understandably, many students and parents are nervous, especially with the recent spread of the Delta variant. On top of that, I know some folks received automated phone messages that there might not be bus service to bring their children to school, which can add to stress and anxiety. We had mixed results with the buses this morning. Acting Mayor Janey, do you take any personal responsibility for not having this sorted out before the school year started? I recognize that you said last night you had reached agreement with the bus drivers union, but that was about 18 hours from the start of the school day today.
Thank you so much for the question. And I know for many parents, the first day of school can be scary, and for our students. And certainly this year, the first time we are bringing all of our school children back in 18 months of a pandemic. And I'm proud that we've had all of our buses covered, all of the bus routes were covered. 57% was the on-time arrival. That number is higher than the 5-year average. It is higher than last year, and is higher than the year before when we last had all of our kids back in. And in fact, we had 80% attendance, the highest attendance rate for the first day of school on record. This is a milestone for the city of Boston that we were able to do this in a pandemic, and we had a great first day. And certainly don't want to see any child get to school late, but we know that 85% of kids were in school within 15 minutes of the bell. And so we can continue to do better
Thank you.
As the weeks go on and the months go on, but we've had a great first day.
Thank you.
This question is for Andrea Campbell. You've made clear that you felt a certain negative radio campaign ad tying you to charter schools this week was unfair, but you did support the 2016 ballot question, which would have opened the door for more charter schools to open in Massachusetts. So do you feel there should be more charter schools in Boston?
First of all, that's the responsibility of the state. not the mayor's office. My responsibility has always been and my focus on improving Boston Public Schools. I'm the only candidate who's a product of Boston Public Schools. I went to all 5 BPS schools. I should say the only candidate who went to 5 BPS schools, including Boston Latin School. All 5 of my schools were excellent. They took this poor girl from Roxbury and sent me off to Princeton University, and by every metric made me successful. But it's the same system that failed my twin brother Andre, who went to the Burke High School, Madison Park, and we're still generations later talking about how those schools are under-resourced and underinvested in. I'm the only candidate in this race who put out a plan 3 years ago on how to improve and close the gaps within Boston Public Schools. It's the very reason I jumped into the mayor's race back in September, because of the inaction on that plan. I also have to stress this. I live in reality. I live in Mattapan. 5%. Families in Mattapan have a 5% chance of getting into a high-quality BPS school compared to some other neighborhoods where it's 80%. And so just like I don't judge the choice of the folks on this stage, I don't do it with my parents in the city. And my job and responsibility is to make sure that we improve Boston Public Schools so our children don't have to choose another system.
We're going to do rapid fire now on a couple of questions that we want to put to all 5 of you. Please consider this rapid response. You'll have 30 seconds for each answer, and we won't do rebuttals on this. So the first question, a lot of discussion about Boston's exam schools and equity in recent years. Debate over whether it should be purely merit-based admission, factor in race, factor in where students live. In 30 seconds and in clear terms, what do you believe the policy should be regarding admissions to Boston's exam schools? John Barrows.
The exam schools are important. My wife graduated from Boston Latin. My brother graduated from Boston Latin. It is important, though, that we have a very clear process for how you get into those schools, and that it's fair and that people understand it. I think the objective has to be that we have more diversity. The numbers recently have been unacceptable. 7% black students at BLS just doesn't cut it. We've got to make sure that we're driving for more diversity, more opportunity in all of our exam schools. And then we need to make sure that we can focus on the other schools and invest in schools in all neighborhoods.
Thank you, Andrea Campbell.
I support the recent changes, but I have to stress this. It's the wrong question. We need to focus on how do we improve all of our high schools. We spend so much attention on the exam schools. The non-exam high schools have been struggling every single day. These are teachers and staff who are working hard to resource and, of course, to make sure that their students who are largely special needs students, English learners, get what they need to be successful. Madison Park, we need more than one Madison Park. We need a VOTEC system that we need to establish immediately when you think about the jobs now and the jobs of the future. So as mayor, I'm going to change the whole conversation because it's essential that we do in order to deliver for our students.
Anissa Saibi-George.
I'm glad you asked that question. I'm the only candidate who has been consistent in a commitment to have an exam for admission to the 3 exam schools. I'm the only candidate who's also been consistent, especially over these last 6 years, learning from my experience in the classroom from 13 years, who believes in early literacy, who believes in fixing our special education system, who believes in realigning our grade configurations, who believes in investing in that high school redesign, who believes in making sure that our kids are prepared before they're even near 6th grade when it's time to take exam to admit to the exam schools.
I agree with those things as well. So you're not the only candidate. But I would say that I do believe the exam schools should have an exam. The new changes include the exam. I think the new changes that were adopted by the school committee are important to ensure that there is more inclusion in our exam schools, and that this new policy should be given a chance to see how it is working.
Thank you, Kim Janey. And now to Michelle Wu.
My boys are in BPS now, but this is my 2nd round as a BPS mom, having raised my younger sister as her legal guardian while my mom was living with mental illness. And so we've been through middle school and high school and BPS, and the stress, the tightrope that it feels we are asking parents to walk. I support equity in every part of our district, ensuring that we have grades, a test aligned with the BPS curriculum, and socioeconomic criteria to account for differences in resource levels. But this conversation needs to be about disparities across the entire district and how we can wrap around support so that every seat is high quality.
Thank you.
I'd like to hear each of you give a grade to Boston Public School Superintendent Brenda Cassellius and explain your grade in 30 seconds. We'll go in reverse alphabetical order and start with Michelle Wu.
I'll give a C. We have not truly seen the leadership in the district free from a tumultuous set of circumstances. In the 3 years that Superintendent Conselius has been here, BPS has gone through possibly the hardest period that we have experienced. And so I'm looking forward to working with and digging into school leadership to ensure that the mayor's office is partnering all along the way.
Kim Janey.
I would agree with that assessment in terms of her tenure being marked by COVID-19 and unprecedented challenges, and our students and our families are certainly being impacted by that still to this day. But I would certainly give her a much higher grade. I would give her a B+.
I would agree with the letter grade of C, and as a former teacher, I am used to grading, but I think we need to look at the subject matter. Today's on-time arrival with the school buses at 57% is not a passing grade. It was not appropriate for me to bring that home as a kid. I want my kids bringing that grade home from school as well. We need to, of course, understand the implications of COVID and what's happened over this last few months. And we need to also appreciate how we have continued to fail too many of our kids across the district. We've got so much work to do to support all of our 52 to 54,000 students and keep them in the district. They deserve to be in the classroom, in a high-quality seat, in a high-quality school community.
Andrea Campbell.
I would probably say a D, and that is because of the calls I had to take this morning. There's so many parents who were waiting for a bus to come, and the common refrain was, well, we're used to this. Unacceptable. This is a $1.2 billion system, a transportation budget that's $130 million and going up, and it still can't deliver excellent service to our families. We still don't have universal pre-K or an expansion for our 4-year-olds, high school redesign, HVAC system, infrastructure concerns. We need swift action. We need a sense of urgency, and I also believe in accountability.
You know, unfortunately, the superintendent has been given an untenable situation. We're delivering students to school at 57%. We can't fix our bus system. We have a school assignment system that's broken. We put a busing system in to help Black and brown kids have more resources. It is failing them. It is failing all of our children. We need to change that, which is why I'm calling for $4 billion investment in making sure that we have quality schools in all of our neighborhoods. Let's give the superintendent a school system that she can operate, not the stuff that we have now.
Follow-up question to you. Where does the $4 billion come from?
Great question. We would issue green bonds and social justice bonds by providing debt. The city of Boston has a AAA credit rating for 7 years that I'm very proud of, and issuing $4 billion of debt as a city, we would be paying about 2.5% a year. That would cost us about $80 million a year in repayments every year. Boston can afford that, but we could particularly afford that if we can create quality schools in all of our neighborhoods and drop the $130 million in transportation costs that we pay every year. We'll easily pay for the $80 million plus.
Thank you. Anissa Essaibi-George, 30 seconds. Single most important thing to do as mayor. One thing for the Boston Public Schools. 30 seconds.
Well, I'm going to talk about the school bus budget. It's actually $137 million. It's a budget that we've gone over every single year, and we need to reduce that. When we think about investing $1 million, not 137, $1 million into a high-need school that is 10 additional teachers. That's 9 teachers and an additional social worker, which I fought so hard to do. We've got lots of work to do. We've got to think about how we're investing that $1.3 billion, and we have to answer the question, how does each dollar serve our students? When we make student-facing decisions, that's the best we can do.
Because it is time now for the candidates' closing statements. We will go in an order that was determined by random draw, and we will start with Andrea Campbell, 45 seconds.
Thank you, and thank you, of course, to all the organizers, and thank you to all the folks who are listening. I have said from the very beginning that I jumped into this mayor's race back in September, recognizing the moment in time we were in, and stressing that while we are a world-class international city, we still are a city that, by many metrics, we're unequal. We have communities that don't have access to good schools, good parks, good housing, you name it. This city took a poor girl from Roxbury and gave me everything to be successful, and sent me off to Princeton University, made me a lawyer, and by every metric I've been a success. But I also recognize it does not afford families the same opportunity I had. I jumped into this mayor's race to say we can absolutely ensure the city of Boston affords every family, whether you're native born or you got here this morning, the same opportunity I had. This is about breaking generational cycles of poverty and trauma.
Thank you.
I hope to earn your vote on September 14th.
Kim Janey, you're next.
Thank you so much. In the last 5 months, we've accomplished a lot. I've opened up the city. We have our kids back in school. Crime is down. We're keeping people in our homes. And Boston continues to be one of the most highly vaccinated big cities in America, but we know our work is not done. We are still in the midst of a pandemic, and we have unprecedented challenges facing our city. Now is the time for us to come together to continue the work that we've started. I am asking for your vote on September 14th so we can do that work together. It is important that we don't go back to the way things were. We have to go better. We have to create a stronger Boston, a Boston that's more equitable, more just, and resilient, and we can do it together. Thank you so much.
Michelle Wu.
Thank you to the moderators and everyone for tuning in tonight. This election is about the future of our city. And as a mom, I wake up every day thinking about that future that we are leaving to our kids. I'm running for mayor to take on the big challenges in Boston because I know how much is possible in our city. I bring a track record of a decade in City Hall, taking on the fights that people said would be impossible to get done. And we've made history in Boston through that. One of the first cities to deliver paid parental leave, taking on equity in city contracting, taking on big corporations that were driving up rents. This is the legacy of our city. We stand up for the important fights. We bring people together to ensure that we're getting things done. We have many more plans on my website, so I'd ask everyone to learn more at michelleforboston.com. Very respectfully ask for your vote.
Thank you. Anissa Essaibi-George, you're up.
Now, thank you to the both of you for moderating a fantastic forum this evening, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share a little bit about my work and a little bit about my hopes for the future of Boston. As mayor of this city, I look forward to leading all of Boston and using my experiences as the daughter of immigrants, as a small business owner, as a classroom teacher, and as a 6-year at-large city councilor to do that work. Certainly look forward to being on the ground and continuing to work with our city's residents to be responsible and responsive to their needs. You will not find me on a soapbox. You will find me in the neighborhoods doing the very important work. I want to be the teacher and the mother and the mayor to lead this city. I look forward to doing it with your partnership. My name's Anissa Essaibi-George. I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you. And John Barrows.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in tonight and for listening to us tonight. Making a Boston where everyone has a seat at the table is my life's work. I'm the only candidate up here that has built new schools. And as mayor, I will build a new school in every neighborhood to make sure every child has a quality seat next to their home. We've talked about affordable housing. It is critical. But I'm the only candidate up here that's built hundreds of affordable housing. And because of that work, hundreds of families have a quality home, roof over their home, and then roof over their head, and they're not worried about paying for their mortgage or their rent because it is affordable. And then we talk about jobs, and it is critical that we make sure that people get back on their feet right after the pandemic. That's why I brought over 140,000 jobs to the city of Boston, and I can continue to bring jobs to our city. Join me. Vote for me on September 14th. Thank you.
And that is all the time we have for today. Stick with